What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the TDR live reaction show. I am back tonight. Jeff Bell, apparently he's got better stuff to do. That's what he told us. So he is not here tonight, but we still got Christian Williams and Jay Stein. So we're going to be diving into some games. We're going to be looking at overall, hey, what does Caleb Williams look like? We're going to be talking to Christian about that. What do the quarterbacks look like? Shador Sanders. And then we're going to get into some talk like, hey, running back issues, wide receiver talk, the 2025 class, how that's playing out. So we'll get into it on this episode. So just stick with us, hit that like button, and as always, leave comments in the chat. We like to chat with you guys. We'll pop it up. We're all unhinged right now on the live show. What is up, man? Let's get into it. Let's talk about it. Colorado versus USC. This game I thought was over at the beginning, and I kind of turned it off, had some stuff to do. Came back, and Colorado kind of came in there. I saw someone tweet out if they had a stopwatch, they could have been closer. So what's our takeaways from the Colorado game? I guess we'll start with Caleb Williams. Let's get into that because I do think people don't talk about him enough. He was 30 for 40 today, 403 yards and 6 touchdowns. He did have that one pick, which I do think is a minor, I guess, flaw in his game is his trust in his arm and maybe his ability to think he can make everything happen. It was kind of a bad pick. What is your takeaway, Christian, from Caleb Williams?
First, I think he was just testing what he could do on that interception. Like that was a crazy throw to make, but he's made so many of them that I think he was just like, yeah, I think I could probably do this. Bad decision, not detrimental. You know, he's a big game hunter. And I think a lot of people think that that's like a negative thing when in reality, he's showing off the ability to make tons and tons of throws. This was one of those games where
I said right here, you don't need to just call me out like that. Like, yes, I think that kind of can be a negative thing sometimes.
No. Well, I wasn't talking about you specifically, but I mean, if the shoe fits, but no, I think a lot of the off structure stuff, wasn't necessarily needed in this game. I think he was on structure, playing with timing quite a bit in this game. He did go off structure, and that second half was a little rough for them. I think the offense kind of stalled out. Lincoln Riley decided he wasn't going to run the ball for whatever reason. He does this all the time. But overall, my main takeaway from this game is the USC defense is atrocious, and we can't really take them as a serious playoff contender at this point, because we look at what Colorado did against Oregon, and I think this USC defense is probably one of the worst in the Pac-12, which is saying something right now. So no matter how good Caleb is, I just don't know that they're going to pull out. They've got a really tough stretch here. They've got Washington and Oregon on their schedule, and they're coming up soon. They've got Utah. I think they get Arizona next, but even that Arizona game, like, I think Arizona can probably keep up with them in scoring points. So I'm a little nervous about that, but Caleb, great, generational.
What do you think, Jay?
I'd agree with Christian on Caleb Williams. There's nothing in the data that's as really bad about Caleb Williams. It's all really good. I was just looking over the stuff today, and you can make cases for certain quarterbacks in one season versus Caleb, but over his full 3 years, Caleb Williams has been dominant from basically the get-go. And it's tough to compare with that. And that's why when you hear statements from Christian that's like one of the best prospects we ever seen, that's what this means. It means he did it as soon as he started in college, and it's sort of continued through and been consistent over 3 years. And that makes for a really good quarterback prospect, and sort of kind of breaking all the models and being that sort of perfect kind of prospect that you're looking for. So yeah, I mean, I completely agree on the Caleb Williams thing. I think the USC offense is a pretty interesting offense. They have a lot of playmakers at wide receiver, a lot of interesting guys, including some very young guys they're really good. And Marshawn Lloyd is sort of having that sort of resurgence. So it feels like this USC team, at least on offense, is rolling. I think Caleb Williams today, I don't think you read the stat line, but 403 pass yards and 6 touchdowns. That's huge. And yeah, I guess we're playing Colorado, but I'd also agree with a Christian on USC defense. And I think I think we've heard this over and over again, and it was a problem last year. I think it's a problem this year. When we go to Oregon, when you go to Washington, and then when you think about USC as a playoff team, it's
Yeah.
going to be hard for them to overcome the defense. And yeah, they're going to put up a lot of points, but if you can't stop your opponent, it's going to be tough for them to make it far if they do end up making it to the playoffs. I honestly think that they're probably going to have one loss either to Oregon or Washington here at some point, maybe even 2 losses from there. But it's really fun. Caleb Williams is one of those guys that can put the team on his shoulders and pull out games, and that's exactly what you want to see for an NFL prospect. And he'll likely, in my opinion, be a clear-cut number 1 overall pick next year.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing from this game I take away is Christian hit on the head. Why do you only give Marshawn Lloyd 13 carries? Like 13 carries for 84 yards, especially when you're up by 21. He had a touchdown and he looked good. Marshawn Lloyd looks good. Christian talked about him preseason. He said, "Hey, this is a kid that could pop off. He looks like he could go day 2. Why are you giving him 13 carries? That's ridiculous." And then Caleb Williams had 5. Austin Jones only had 3. So as a team, they only had 25 carries. Like, to me, that's the blasphemy. That's the problem that I have with USC's approach in that second half. Then I do want to talk about the receivers though. So they moved the ball around. We got Taj Washington, 8 catches, 117 yards, a touchdown. Brendan Rice, he's been getting a little bit buzz out there. 5 catches, 81 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Mario Williams got a touchdown. He came out of nowhere. Zachariah Branch did not play in this game, so they definitely moved around a little bit. Dorian Singer, 3 catches, 24 yards, and a touchdown. He was getting buzz preseason. I don't see him getting as much buzz anymore. But if you had to pick a receiver in this room, Christian, that you're like, yeah, I can hang my hat around this kid. This kid might have some NFL upside. Which one would it be? Outside of Branch. Let's say Branch is not. Branch doesn't count. Branch didn't play tonight, so I'm going to pick the guys that are on the box sheet or box score.
It's actually so Mekhi Lemon is still a guy that I'm excited about, but he didn't really make an impact today. I was kind of hopeful that he would step into that Zachariah Branch role a little bit, but man, I think you can make a case for Taj Washington and Brendan Rice as NFL assets, guys that I think we can project forward. Brendan Rice has kind of been doing it for 2 years now, and everyone kind of wrote him off heading into the season. Like, he's a Colorado transfer. He played there first. But like, why would you write off a guy with that type of NFL bloodline when he's got really good film? He was, I don't know what the stats say, but the film is really good. He had one of those touchdowns was a nice little slant route. I wish he would have held on to a couple more balls. I think he could have scored another touchdown somewhere in there. But overall, I think I could project him. He's probably more of like a day 3 type of pick. But and I think same with Taj Washington, where I don't see these guys getting into day 2. But I do think that they're NFL guys that'll make some rosters.
We can't. Brendan Rice's first 2 years was at Colorado, so before Deion. So let's just throw those 2 years out. And then last year I think it's 700 yards and everything there. Yeah, I think he is explosive for his size, 6'3", 210. If that's really what his size is, so that's what I think excites you. I know Taj is old, so I know that the analytics is not going to like Taj. I think this is his 5th year, so I think he's a 5th-year senior. But I mean, when you're looking at Brendan, he's a 4-year senior, so we could see that he has the background though. He's got the name pedigree. I think that matters. I think when you're talking about what Brendan can bring to the table. I don't know if Jay's a Mario Williams. Were you ever a Mario Williams stan?
No, maybe the first year I was
That's good.
kind of interested because he was like a non-zero type of guy. He actually had some production, but year 2 and 3 it kind of kept going down. In this year it's even worse.
Yeah.
So that doesn't fit. When I'm looking at production, I'm looking at reception yards per team pass attempt, which is basically just sort of a market share type of thing. And honestly, these wide receivers, except for Zachariah Branch and Deuce Robinson so far, don't look all that appealing. Dorian Singer was the one that I was kind of like hoping, hanging my hat on, because he did have a good year 2 on a reception yards per team pass attempt. But this year it's sort of fallen off. I think there's just too many weapons that it's getting spread too thin. So when you look at these market share type of things, it's tough to have a guy really dominate those things when all of these guys are kind of sort of similar. Then Brendan Rice, yeah, he's a fourth year guy. I didn't see the breakout in year 3 and year 4. I think if he does have that breakout, which right now it's not quite to that level yet, we'll see what it looks like after this last week's numbers. But like he just needs to like produce a ton. We need one of these guys to really step up and take over and start producing a ton for me to get really excited on here. Right now, it's kind of just everybody's sort of sharing the ball. But if Dorian Singer starts, if he's the guy that actually steps up and starts producing, that would be an interesting one to me. And then of course the two young guys, Zachariah Branch and Deuce Robinson, and Christian mentioned Lemon as well.
Yeah,
But
we're not
otherwise
counting
those other guys aren't. Otherwise, those other guys aren't that interesting to me, honestly.
Yeah, I think so. Any last takes on USC's overall play? We kind of talked about their defensive side, but anything else on that side, Christian?
No, I just give Marshawn the ball a little bit more.
Yeah,
Please.
they have to get that rushing attack going because they got to keep that defense off the field. Like just you got to grind the game. You're gonna have to make those possessions. I know Riley wants to speed up the game and have more possessions. I don't know if that's going to be the way they win these things. Like they're going to have to figure out a way to have that that medium attack. Like, okay, hey, we're going to score, yes, but maybe not quickly. We got to try to limit how long our defense is out here. And if their defense can just get turnovers, then that will help them. I think going forward, you're looking at something like, hey, if they can get those turnovers, then that can stop them. But they just haven't been able to get takeaways. They got that one takeaway today, but overall, it just hasn't looked good. Now, I do want to talk about Colorado though. They shout out Colorado in terms of battling back. They scored 27 points that second half. It was against a USC defense like we talked about that is struggling. I still don't know how Grinch has a job, and I know he ruined a couple parlays for Christian today, so I know Christian's pissed. But Shedeur Sanders, 45 attempts, 371 yards, 4 touchdowns. I asked a poll question, so I definitely want to get your guys' take on that. So Christian, if you had to pick right now in Devy or in college football, who you taking, Shedeur or JJ McCarthy? Because I think it's like 60-40 almost with Shedeur winning the poll right now. Do you think we're leading Sanders, or we still think JJ is the guy?
It's JJ for me. I wouldn't say the gap is all that small either. I think I have JJ up in my top 5 Devy quarterbacks, and I have Shedeur sitting at like 10, 11, or 12. I just think that there's certainly like Shedeur did a ton of really good things today, but there were moments where you could see the faults in his game where like he had the one free rusher on the RPO where, Caleb just throws it sidearm around the defense, and Shedeur can't really do stuff like that yet. Like I do think there's value in being accurate, throwing with anticipation and everything like that. But I talked about this early, even after the TCU game. Shedeur is really good at operating Sean Lewis's offense. And Sean Lewis's offense is one of the better ones in the country in terms of scheming guys wide open. I think Shedeur has shown that he can throw into tight windows, but I just think like we're talking about JJ, who I think is coming out this year, versus Shedeur, who I think will get another year with Big 12 competition. Maybe down the line, Shedeur does develop that, but I'm not 100% in on Shedeur being this number 1 overall pick like Mel Kiper, because that's too rich for me.
I know where Jay's going because Jay's a JJ guy.
Yeah. I mean, I've been touting JJ for a while now. The numbers looked really good for JJ, and I didn't understand why people were down on him coming in the season, and I think that's just gotten better for me. So maybe it's a little bit of a bias here, but I'm just kind of sticking with the JJ McCarthy bet. Just for numbers wise, EPA per play, QBR, JJ this year looks better than Shedeur Sanders. There's basically one category that I'm looking at that there's a couple, but there's one major category, which is like the PFF pass grade, where Shedeur Sanders is beating JJ McCarthy. But I think there might be I think there's some exceptions you have within that PFF pass grade about why that might be the case. But most of the stuff I'm looking at from a QB perspective, like EPA per play, QBR, stuff like that, it looks like JJ is having a little bit better year than Shedeur this year. So
Yeah, and JJ looked good today, even though Urban Meyer said it was going to be a close game and possibly an upset, as Michigan wins 45-7. Urban Meyer, Jay, I hope you don't stand for Urban Meyer, because Urban Meyer needs to go away. Like, Urban Meyer needs to find somewhere else to go. He drives me nuts. Him and Ryan Day's fake ass beard. But anyway, so JJ looked good today. 12 for 16, 156 yards, 2 touchdowns. Had that rushing touchdown. What are you going to say, Christian?
I was just gonna drop some advanced stats per my charting. So this is something I've kind of shared with our patrons at the Devy Royale, so I'm not gonna give all of it away. I haven't charted Shadur yet, but JJ McCarthy's on target percentage coming into this week was 80.68%. And his perfectly placed percentage was right in line with Bo Nix, who's only throwing behind the line of scrimmage. And it was more advanced than Caleb Williams, than Drake May, and Quinn Ewers, and all of these guys. So from a film perspective, when you couple all that with the fact that he's throwing with anticipation and timing and these crazy window throws, I mean, people would come around on JJ. I think just not a lot of people are watching Michigan games because they're playing nobody. So sorry, Kevin,
Okay. We played Nebraska today. Top 10 program in 1990. All right. So just we have to play who's in front of us. Okay. That we played a Big Ten schedule. It's not our fault. I do think that Shadur is coming out in 2025. So that's why, I got a little heat. I do a big board every week for football guys, and someone was like in my DMs asking, "Why do you hate Shadur?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't really hate him. I put him on the watch list, but I put him there because I think he's coming out in 2025. He'd be smart too. The quarterbacks in the 2025 class are not as strong as this class. I mean, we have Aller. But after that, there's tons of question marks. Connor Weigman's out for the year. Kate Klubnik has not looked amazing out there. And so when you're looking at that, Shadur could easily find himself as quarterback 1 of the 2025 class. Now, I don't think he'd be that Aller, but he could. He could find out himself as that spot. So that's the way I look at Shadur. And that's why he's still a risk, I think, drafting him in Devy. Like, if you're still going to go get him, there's still question marks going forward. And I do think Colorado could challenge the Big 12 next year. Like, there's, with Texas and Oklahoma leaving, Colorado could win it. And that's something that I think they want to do, especially for his dad as they leave. And as when he takes a job after that, wherever he's going to go, that's, I think, the kicker there for him. Now, and I want to give, I'll be honest. I was a little down on Shadur. I was a little nervous. I wasn't down. I just I was hesitant. I was like, hey, let's see how it translates. You got to give him credit for some of those damn throws he made. He made some throws today that you're like, okay, you got on the dime. You could play quarterback there. I did put on the show sheet as a Amari Miller thing. We get a lot of hot takes in Devy in terms of when we see games like this. He's a true freshman. I think he's a true freshman, right? 7 catches, 196 yards today, and a touchdown. Jay, what do we think about Amari Miller?
I think he is a thing. The problem is, just like you said, you have a 1 game breakout here, and we just have to see it over consistently over the rest of the year is what you'd want to see. And the thing at Colorado is they have a ton of playmakers at wide receiver. So I'm not sure why he wasn't seeing as much of the field and wasn't producing in the first few games. But this was certainly the welcome Amari Miller game here, and there were some pretty tremendous catches. He had one where he was dragging a defender, fighting him off, and caught the ball with one hand and went right to the ground and secured the ball. And there's some amazing plays that he was making here, and that's a true freshman that's doing that. And really we don't necessarily always see a tremendous amount of production out of true freshmen, and he's already ticked the box of getting out there and actually playing. And so this is a good start for him. I do think it's a thing, but I need to see it over the rest of the season.
For what it's worth, 4-star kid, good 24/7 Sports composite, wide receiver 38 on their composite ranking. So I mean, not a nobody. Not just some random walk-on that had a great day as a true freshman. He's a legit recruit, so definitely a name to keep an eye on.
Yeah, they kind of keep a watch list. Hey, who is this kid? How is Travis Hunter coming back? How's that going to affect him? Whatever the case may be there. But yeah, all right. Let's jump over to LSU Ole Miss, because anytime I could talk about Jackson Dart, we're talking about Jackson Dart on this show. Because crazy. I mean, no defense played at all. Ole Miss scored 21 points in that fourth quarter, 55-49. They held on to win. 4-1. I think this does highlight how good Alabama's defense is, though, and how much they're screwed not having a quarterback because, I mean, they held Ole Miss's offense basically stand put there. Jackson Dart, 389 yards, 4 touchdowns. He has looked very, very good this season. Now, he struggled a little bit against Alabama, but overall, like, you have to like what you see from Jackson Dart. From this year. And then we also had a Quinshon Judkins breakout. He did have 33 carries, though, but he had 177 yards and a touchdown. We had Trey Harris, had 8 catches, 153 yards and a touchdown. Jordan Watkins, 5 catches, 103 yards. But let's move back to Jackson. So Jackson Dart has looked solid. I think he comes back another year. I think Jackson's kind of in that range of like he's going to go back into 25 class, which is smart because like we just talked about with the lack of quarterbacks in that class, how he's there. But you have to be, you have to be really happy. I think Lane's got to be happy with him, right, Christian?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is the version of Jackson Dart I thought we would see last year, but there was clearly he got to campus late, I think is what happened because of the transfer. I think I remember that happening. I might be wrong there.
He did.
But
He came like in March-ish, like right around there.
So he missed like I feel like most of spring, and I feel like it took him a second to get his footing. But there were still signs of a good quarterback out there. You know, I think the decision making was certainly questionable last year. This year, that has been a lot better, and all of the tools that we saw when he was at USC as a freshman are still there. So
they are.
I mean, to me, we've got Daniel Jeremiah tweeting that he likes the kid, and that's a good sign that he might be on some draft radars. I do think going to the 2025 class would be smart because I think that he's another one of those kids that could challenge for that QB1. I think that while everyone's going to say, well, that's the next Matt Corral, and everyone hyped him as a first-round pick. Different type of player, different type of skill set. I'm excited for Jackson Dart. I'm cautiously optimistic that he's going to become dynasty relevant in the future.
I saw Jackson Dart. I saw old Jackson Dart that me and Christian fell in love with as a freshman at USC. That's what I saw tonight. Like when I was watching play, I was like, dude, that's a high school tape out there at Utah, just slinging it, running. He had 50 yards, for a touchdown off 7 carries. You saw that playmaking ability, and he made a couple throws. Even that throw that he made to Judkins, that first touchdown that he threw, that touchdown pass, he put a little touch on it, and I was like, oh, okay. And it wasn't a perfect throw, but last year that throw is going 5 feet above Judkins' head, and you're just like, what's going on? So we haven't seen those things. He's playing with his offense. I'm really impressed with him, but I do think he's going to come back next year. What are the numbers telling us about Dart, Jay?
Jackson Dart is having a really good third season, and what's interesting is season 2 was not that bad. I mean, it wasn't perfect. It didn't meet a lot of what I was looking for, but it isn't like a terrible season. But year 3, when I'm looking at EPA per play, looking at QBR, and looking at adjusted yards per attempt, it's exactly what you want to see on an age-adjusted basis, and it's above where Shadur Sanders is. So currently on those metrics, we have Jackson Dart above Shadur Sanders at this point in time, and it's that's not just looking at like total yards or stuff like that. It is EPA per play, expected points added per play, QBR, and adjusted yards per attempt. So those are the 3 that I was looking at today, which is interesting. Shadur Sanders is getting all of the hype, to the point where he's a top 2 quarterback, or maybe right behind Caleb Williams, and Jackson Dart is not getting much of that yet. One thing I'd mention, Trey Harris, he had a really good first game. He's been injured, and this is one of his first games back, and the guy looks really, really good. I believe he is a 4th year, but his 3rd year was actually a pretty decent year. Whereas, some of the 4th years where they don't really do anything for 1, 2, and 3, but then they have a really good 4th year. Trey Harris had a pretty decent 3rd year as well. So that's definitely a guy that's hitting on my radar as somebody to watch out for in this offense.
All right.
Quick note, Jackson Dart is a full year younger than Shadur Sanders as well, and has played more Power 5 ball. So worth noting. Jackson Dart is only 20 years old and won't turn 21 until next May. So it's what Jay likes to hear.
Jay, he's getting all giddy down there. You see that? He's like, oh, I didn't know he's that young. All right, we going.
Well, you guys are talking about him going back. So,
he'll go back.
That gives me
He'll still only be 22. He's not going to be freaking Bo Nix at 26 or like Michael Penix Jr. These
exactly.
days.
He would still be 21 on draft night too.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
you know,
yeah,
it's all good things.
See, those analytics don't take over quite yet. It's like Cinderella. Clock did not strike 12. We're okay there. No, I think it's just something to note. I think Jackson is looking a little bit better. Okay? So I talked about Quinshon Judkins last week here on the channel as kind of a Devy faller, and I was just saying, hey, he hasn't had a good game yet. I wouldn't necessarily classify this as like I'm feeling more comfortable because 33 carries is a lot of carries. You still only average about 5 yards a carry, which is way more than I can average. So everybody out there, you just call me fat. It's totally okay. But I guess like that offensive line has been an issue. So we've talked about that. LSU just got destroyed up front. I don't know what was going on there, which is not good for LSU team out there. So does this Judkins game kind of like does it stop the fire? Does it stop the bleeding? Or are we still like nervous overall about Judkins, Christian?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're going to get a few of these games. I didn't expect one of them to be against LSU, if I'm being completely honest. But
yeah,
I mean, the thing about Judkins was last year, every game was like this. And so why we haven't seen that to this point, I'm still a little bit nervous about his future outlook. I think he does look a little more explosive out there. I don't know what role injuries have played in his slow start, but I think he looked good out there. It's just we'll talk about the entire running back issue in the Devy landscape and really the fantasy landscape in general, but he's not one that I'm still like super comfortable projecting as a top 12 dynasty running back. But I'd like to see him build on this performance for sure.
What do you think, Jay?
I mean, year one was like off the charts amazing. So I'll be giving him the benefit of doubt quite a bit, but so was like Jaden Knotts and some other guys, right? And we've seen it before where it just sort of falls off and doesn't come through. So I mean, he still needs to perform. I'd say today was a decent step towards that, a pretty great outing, and we just need a bunch more of those this year. And last year, he got a ton of volume, and I'm not sure exactly what the team issues or injuries that Christian brought up or the offensive line issues that we're having, but like as long as you keep producing, you're okay in my book. And so far this year, it's been sort of a disappointment. And you'll get the benefit of the doubt because year one was good, but you still need to keep producing for it to work out for me. And if year two is down and there's no real explanation, like for instance, Travion Henderson had a incredible freshman year. Year two was down, but it was because he had an injury. So if you have those types of injuries, you're willing to look past some of those things. But then you just need to see it again at some point. So then year three would have to be up. So really, there's plenty of time for him to bounce back here. Just the first 4 weeks have been pretty disappointing. And maybe we're on a new trajectory to get you back into where we need to be. But still giving him the benefit of the doubt because year one was so good.
Yeah, I have a hard time with this one because I hate running backs now all of a sudden. But like Ulysses Bentley looked better than Judkins, I thought, at times. Like I thought he looked more explosive at times. So like part of me is like, man, like what is really going on there? But to your point, you have to benefit of the doubt. He did produce last year. I think he was the SEC's leading rusher last year. I think. I'm pretty sure. So, I mean, and how dare you take a shot at PFF's Jay Knott? PFF loves Jay Knott. Like, Jay Knott is like the number one player at PFF. And I still like Jay Knott, too.
I was just going to say, I still really like Jay Knott.
I like Jay Knott.
165 yards a day. Like, he's been
I just
balling,
like take a shot at
that's fair. That's fair. But,
when I can.
But that's an interesting conversation because I think Jay Knott has a lot of those athleticism. Like I think he would hit more marks than a guy like Quinshon Judkins, even though he wasn't maybe as productive as him last year. But if he's hitting some of those thresholds that Jay's looking for, the film, I mean, he's a long strider, but he's a fast boy and he can, I mean, I'm sure his breakaway run rate is still pretty high this year. So, I don't know. Maybe running backs aren't dead after all. I just get so excited about guys like Jaden Knott that just continued production at Cal of all places.
The difference was Quishon Judkins was being taken in first round of Devy drafts, and Jaden
Yeah,
Ott was barely going in the fifth, probably like seventh round or something
exactly.
like that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that to me, that's the huge difference. That's why Quishon Judkins was a disappointment, and
Right.
Jaden
Oh,
Ott
for sure.
continues to kind of like fly under the radar, even though he's producing like a ton.
So that's the
Yeah.
thing. It's like I think when you're looking at running back position, so yeah, well, let's just talk about it. Screw it. So when you're looking at the running back position, so when we're thinking of like, um, I tweeted out today. I was like, I don't feel like I'm very comfortable with any Devy running back right now. Like even Travion Henderson and these other guys that we take. Now, my biggest take of it was based on where they were drafted in a Devy draft. I don't feel like they're actually living up to that expectations. And the problem with them not living up to that ADP expectation, as Jay would point out, as he does an investor series, you're not going to get back what you put into that investment. And I think with the running backs right now, is there any running back right now that you could get more for that you draft in the first 2 rounds? So like if we're thinking guys like Travion Henderson, we're thinking who are the other guys? Nicholas Singleton, you're thinking Raheem Sanders, you're thinking Braylon Allen, those guys, those running backs that kind of went those top 2 rounds. Can you get back for them the same value that you put into them in drafts? Do you think so, Christian? Maybe Singleton?
Maybe Singleton, but if people pop on the film, they're like he's putting some concerning stuff on his film this year.
He
I still
is.
like
He
him,
is.
but like I mean, the fumble on the kickoff today didn't help his cause, but then just even efficiency wise, I don't think he's really been there this year. And I think that he's missing clear lanes and some of the stuff that he had issues with last year. He just hasn't shown a ton of growth. But he's the one that I think is retaining value because people haven't popped on the Penn State film just yet. Like right now would be the time to get out of those investments if you can, if you're worried about it, because I think people are still trying to catch up. Now, I will say we've kind of highlighted the running back issue. So if people are watching us, I think you might be losing out on an opportunity to do that. But yeah, I mean, the entire position, I think you have to attack it with incoming true freshmen and go after the 5-star kids, because I almost replied to you earlier, Kevin, and said, CJ Baxter, that's the only one, but only because
Yes.
his value was so depressed because he's a true freshman and people get a little leery on those. So, and even then, like his film has been okay. He's had a couple nice runs, but the stats aren't there. And I don't, Jay's not going to like him and his model if this pace keeps up, because Jonathan Brooks is kind of dominating the touches there. But I think that's where it would be. If I were doing a Devy draft today, I'd probably tackle true freshman running backs and kind of hope that they hit, and then just keep doing that over and over because they have built-in value, kind of.
What do you think, Jay?
Yeah, I think I would kind of liken this 2024 running back class to last year's wide receiver class, in the fact that when we were going into the season, we had all these high expectations for, 2 or 3 or 4 guys, and they actually just kind of like missed what the expectations were. If you think about Jackson Smith-Njigba, he was injured, didn't play much. Jordan Addison didn't have the season that we thought he was going to have. Quentin Johnston didn't really have the season that we thought he was going to have. These guys all looked really good. We had such high expectations, and then when we went through the season and they actually had to produce over a season, it didn't really come to fruition. And that's kind of how this 2024 running back class feels. There's tons of high expectations for it, and the production just never really showed up this year so far. There's still plenty of time. As far as like the couple of Devy running backs that I think are pretty important, I think you make some good points on Singleton, but I think Singleton is a bit different. I think Travion Henderson is a bit different, and so those two are the ones that I think hold the most value. But the best thing you could have done, and this is happening across the NFL spectrum as well when you play dynasty fantasy football, is focus on the wide receivers, the quarterbacks, and then when you're working on running backs, you just play for that year, whatever. It's like a redraft for running back, and you probably don't want to hold those running backs for too long. You want to keep and hold your value at the wide receivers and the quarterbacks. And I feel like that's kind of filtering a little bit down into now Devy or college fantasy football or C2C is it's these running backs. It's harder and harder to hold their value. I mean, this year at the top of my board was Travion Henderson, Braylon Allen, and Raheem Sanders. There's a few other guys like Donovan Edwards and some other guys, and it just besides Travion Henderson and Braylon Allen's put up some decent numbers, but I think even him, he's getting kind of dinged for draft buzz and stuff like that. The best thing you could have done this draft season was to avoid any of those guys, and then pick like a Devin Neal or an Audric Estime or something like that in the 6th, 7th, 8th round, and you would have been better off from your whole roster construction if you did it that way, which is a pretty interesting thing because I don't think that was always the case in Devy. I think for a while, we could identify running backs fairly early, and those guys would be pretty successful going forward. So, that is, I think, a change. I think it has to do with NFL fantasy football, and it's kind of bleeding that back into college fantasy football too.
So I'm moving over to like the fact. So I'm looking at running backs now, and I'm thinking of, okay, how did you attack this? So we just talked about Jay Knott. You could have got Jay Knott for free, 6th round, 5th round, wherever the case may be. And you're looking at just what makes more sense when you're doing Devy drafts. And I think that it's wide receivers, but I do think that if you draft Cedric Baxter, he's going to hold some value. He'll probably be still a 1st round pick next year. But I think that there is the way I look at Devy always is I'm dynasty driven and an NFL side, because that's where you make your money, is like maybe you sell after the freshman year. Maybe you look at some of these guys like Judkins. What could you have gotten for Judkins heading into this year? You probably could have got a pretty good haul on the NFL side, because I do think there's still managers that rebuild through running backs, which is dumb, but they do it. And so, especially in Devy, when I first started playing Devy, anytime anybody's up for a rebuild, the only thing they wanted was Devy running backs. That was it. Like, they always just talked about Devy running backs. Whereas now I think it's like, no, I want, give me Evan Stewart, give me Luther Burden, give me these other wide receivers now. So I do think that's something to know. And I think from a dynasty perspective and an NFL side perspective, you could buy cheap running backs on the NFL side. Like, you can buy very, very cheap running backs on the NFL side to production. Look at Raheem Mostert. Look at some of these guys that you could buy on that side. So I just think that the running back position needs to be, I think it's going to be devalued completely in Devy. Like, I don't even know if you need to draft some of these running backs there, because I don't think you need it on the NFL side. I don't think you really need those guys coming in. Now, obviously there's different talent. Bijan Robinson is one of those guys you're going to draft because he's Bijan Robinson. I do think Travion's in that category. But like, even for me, I dropped Travion to, I think it was number 9 on my big board right now. And it's not because I don't like Travion. It's because I'm concerned about the running back position. So he's my first running back in the top 12. And he's at 9 now. I moved Brock Bowers ahead of him because you're looking at Brock and you're looking at positional advantage at the tight end position. I think it matters. I think Brock can be that guy. So I do think that when you're looking at that, Troy Franklin, I moved ahead of him. Emeka, Malik Neighbors, Xavier Worthy. Like, I think I have Xavier now in my top 5 with Malik. I think both those guys are pretty close. So, and it's just because of the value that you have. So I think from the running back perspective, you have to be very careful, right? So Blake Corum, 2 years ago, you could have got tons of value for Blake Corum. Last year, maybe in the middle of the year, maybe, but then after you got injured and stuff, then you probably dipped a little bit. Now you could probably buy, if you sold Blake Corum 2 years ago, you could probably buy him for pretty cheap now compared to what he was going for. So like, I do think there's perspective for Devy running backs. And I do also think that this class was the incoming freshman class is the running backs. I was redoing my rankings today. After Cedric, it's desolate. Like, there's not a lot of stuff going on in that running back position there. So that's the other thing is like, hey, I think it just also depends on the value of the class. Anything else, Christian, on that?
No, I'm sad about the state of running backs in general. I think that, we've talked about it. It's an NFL problem too, but that trickles down. And I just wonder what that looks like for even recruiting moving forward. Like, how many of these guys are just going to transition and be receivers? So we'll see how it plays out, but it's certainly not a position that I'm more comfortable. I'm probably more comfortable taking a Brock Bowers over, a surefire tight end prospect than I am any running back prospect that I think could be surefire,
Yeah. Which is crazy to think about. Like, yeah. But I also think, so I like that you brought up the recruiting thing. Maybe we're going to start seeing less and less running backs that are very good. Like, in terms of like the, 247, we're going to see maybe people are going to go away from that running back position. You see with Barkley and all these other guys have been injured. You see Josh Jacobs. You see all these guys. I was just thinking about that today. It was weird. I was in the shower, so this is going to get like X-rated. But I was like thinking about it, like as my kids are screaming, Jay gets that. So like I was just like, man, like these guys don't get their second contract. These running backs aren't getting their second contract right now. And like from a Devy perspective, like, why? Look at Kendall Milton. Kendall Milton came in as a top 5 running back prospect going to Georgia out here from Fresno State. 2 knee injuries, can't get healthy. That kid's just never going to be there. But he was also a freaking great defensive player. Like, what if he just stayed on defense? Maybe Kendall Milton would have been a linebacker or whatever the case may be. And I think that's something to know. I think that's just when you think about it, now how does that transition now into Devy in college football and how you're drafting these guys? I think you have to adjust a little bit. I think maybe you need to go to that wide receiver position, or maybe some of these quarterbacks that you feel maybe a little bit comfortable with. Jackson Arnold could be one that you could get a little bit in that second, third round now instead of kind of reaching there. And then you grab a Devin Neal, you grab a Jaden Knott, you grab some of these guys in that running back position, you can go there. But even then, I don't know. I might take a shot on those guys, but I might just take some wide receivers or trade some of those picks for some NFL assets if I'm kind of contending on that side. But I would say if you're trying to rebuild in a Devy league, rebuild to that wide receiver position. Evan Stewart was not looked at as being a very hot prospect this last year over the summer. I would have targeted him in every league because I'm just that guy. But that's kind of how I would look at that. All right, let's talk about Notre Dame and Duke. We'll get into that game and kind of talk about the reactions there. Riley Leonard got injured. I think that's something to know. I think it's his ankle. He got banged up. I didn't see the play. Christian was watching it live. But from what it sounds like, he's really injured. And so he had 134 yards in this game, but he had a couple of throws that you liked, had 88 yards rushing. They got, Audric Estime, again, 2 touchdowns, 81 yards. He had that 30-yard touchdown run to kind of seal it for Notre Dame. What was your takeaways from this, Christian? Audric is there, Riley Leonard injured, but he did have some pretty good throws. You have to like that.
Yeah, kind of a disappointing game through the air for Riley. I think they kind of talked about it on the broadcast, and I can't wait to get the all 22 film of this because there was no deep threat. There was no threat of this offense stretching the field. So Notre Dame kind of played their safeties up, and so it made this entire field compact for Riley Leonard. And while he makes some nice tight window throws, I think it became pretty difficult for him to do that. Now, we did see some of the tools and the upside. He ran the ball really well. I think this Duke team is a lot better than people anticipated. I thought they were going to win this game. It felt like they were going to win this game. But I think it might speak to Notre Dame's inability to move the ball on offense. Audric Estime is still very good, but I just Sam Hartman isn't it. He had a nice game-winning drive there, but he's just not it. And
he's every Notre Dame quarterback we've ever watched in our lives. Like that's what the Sam Hartman is.
Just a touch better though. He's
Ian
just,
Book plus.
Yes, exactly. But man, I've seen some draft takes on him. He's a career backup, I think, at the NFL level, which is what I thought of Brock Purdy. So I could absolutely be wrong, but just not a lot of good stuff on his side of the ball either. So I don't know. This was one of those games where I think it helps the Ohio State fans like Jay, where Notre Dame pulls out that win and still looks pretty good. But I don't know. Jay, what do you think?
I'm really excited about Audric Estime. This is one of those you get every year you get a few of these guys that just sort of rise up, and sometimes it happens early, sometimes it happens late, and they continue through the whole season. But this profile is a really good profile, and year 2 was not a nothing. He actually did some stuff in year 2. Year 1 was kind of a little bit of a nothing, but on a yards per team play in year 3, it's looking great. He meets the speed, size, with thresholds that we talked about earlier, or with in previous shows. And his rush yards are expected for his career, and per attempt has been pretty decent as well. I think I was looking at all the 2024 guys, and I think he was on a rush yards over expected per attempt was one of the higher ones there. So, that is a guy I'm pretty excited about for this season as one of my fast risers. And we talked about this in previous weeks, but we're getting to the point where, okay, we're talking about tier 2 because of some of these running backs that aren't producing. He's moving up. And so tier 2, by the end of the season, if he keeps this up, maybe the top of the tier 2, behind a few guys, is kind of how I'm thinking about him. So I'm getting pretty excited, pretty bulled up on what the prospects are for Audric Estime, and I'm pretty excited about that. One other call out I do, and just because I watched the Ohio State game, and so I was very familiar with this player from last week, Mitchell Evans, the tight end, who's a junior, has now had 2 pretty good games in a row. They leaned on him quite a bit at the Ohio State game. It seemed to be Sam Hartman's main go-to target, and it looks like again 6 receptions, 134 yards for this Duke game as well. This is a junior, so this is a third year player. So age wise, we're still looking okay. I do need to see a lot more production because the first few weeks there was not much there, but these last 2 games is signaling something. And so if we keep it up, that's something that's interesting to me. And then just the whole Notre Dame tight ends type of argument there. I'm not sure if he's like the most incredibly athletic guy, and so like in my models, he probably won't make it to the top end tier or anything like that. But I think he is a guy that you should be watching as is something that could be interesting if he keeps up the production.
Yeah, something else. Okay, Christian, Audric Estime or Blake Corum?
Estime, but I will say Blake Corum has kind of changed my mind about him this year.
I don't know.
Which I know, but like he's got all those things that NFL teams are looking for, which is like, can you run in multiple schemes? Are you finishing runs really well? He's a small dude, but like there's a lot of power behind his game. But I still lean Estime. I think that his upside's a little greater. I don't know. The running back position has got me in a whirl. I'm not certain that I'm a good. Yeah, I'm not certain that I'm a good evaluator of that position after the last few years. So, it's close.
I think the thing with Blake. So the thing with Blake Corum is like I don't know how big he is because Michigan has a tendency to weigh those dudes a little differently. They put a little foot on the scale while they're getting weighed. Like you see that a little bit. Like if he's measured, I think he's at 213 now, but I don't know if he's 213. And he's 5'8", right? Like he's listed at 5'8". What like it's so like I could see us coming in like the Senior Bowl or whenever they get measured and we're just sitting there and it pops up 5'7" and whatever 180 198 or something like that and you're just like what the hell, like what happened, because he doesn't have Gibbs is kind of exposed to this, even though it doesn't matter because Detroit's not going to use him anyway, but these other guys, so like I think that's what that running back position you're looking at. It's like, man, where are these fit at? But I do think, it's interesting. I think Estime is really good, but there is a chance, like we talked about, he doesn't declare. He could come back. And thinking about maybe NIL money wise, I don't know, maybe it makes more sense for him. He wants to come back. So there is that other area there. All right, I want to jump over to the 2025 wide receivers. Then we'll kind of look ahead and then we'll get out of here. So 2025 wide receiver class, it's really Luther Burden versus Evan Stewart. It's been like that for, a long time. We have Jay's guy, Luther Burden. He loves Luther Burden. He's looked really good. He had another 2 touchdowns today. I don't know how many yards he had, but 130 something in the 130-40 range. I think off the top of my head. I just saw it, but I didn't write it down because I'm a terrible host. And then Evan Stewart, when you're thinking of Evan Stewart and what he did, he's looked good, even though like quarterback position wise, they've kind of been banged up. Obviously, Connor Weigman's out. And that's definitely going to hurt them a little bit. But you know what? Today he did have another touchdown. He had 2 catches, 50 yards and a touchdown. He had a 25-yard touch or 32-yard touchdown, I think, pass. So he's been right there. But Luther has looked really, really good. It's starting to think of like Luther Burden maybe should be a little higher on the list there. But who's your wide receiver 3? So we know kind of Luther and Evan Stewart are going to be battling out there. Is it Tet McMillan from Arizona, Antonio Williams, Barrion Brown, someone else off the board? Christian, who's your wide receiver 3?
I still have Barry in there, but okay. I think it's probably going to be Tet by the end of this season.
I think fascinating. I don't want to cut you off, but you have, You have Evan Stewart, who's what, 180, I think is listed at 175, kind of that tweener. So he's kind of the smaller guy, but he can play on the outside. Then you're going to have, Luther, who's Debo. Everybody's going to call him Debo. He's kind of big, over 200 pounds, kind of plays that role. Then you have Tet, who's old school 6'5", 200 pounds of like, and it's so interesting to me that these three guys are such different, just, perspectives of who they are as players. Like they're completely different. I think that's the fascinating part.
I think you're right. And I think, Barry and Brown's kind of in that. I think Barry's smaller than Evan Stewart. And so, skinnier at least. I think he might be as tall. But yeah, and that's, I think, what makes the wide receiver position kind of hard to nail down too. And why, size has been a big discussion over the last few years for wide receivers. I think we've seen a little bit of evidence over the last couple of years that NFL teams are willing to, overlook that, or they actually prefer the smaller guys. And so, that's why, like, I get nervous about McMillan a bit because I do think he's got the athleticism, but we've seen that type of profile start to fall in the draft a little bit. Whereas the crazy speed guys, when you look at what Miami is doing and what the Dolphins are doing right now and how that speed is such an advantage, a guy like Barry and Brown has a very clear role in an offense to me. So that's why I'm still leaning Barry in, but it's very much so just Berrien and Tet, and then hopefully some of these 2024 guys go back to school because outside of the top two, really, I'm not super confident in this 2025 group, even though Stewart and Burton look like top 15 picks. It's just the depth I'm a little worried about.
Where are you at, Jay?
Yeah, so I'll just mention again, Luther Burden, wherever you rank Evan Stewart, let's put Luther Burden one spot ahead of him. Just mentioned that a couple times.
Come on.
So going into the season, I was Luther Burden, Evan Stewart, Barry and Brown, Antonio Williams, Tet, and then Matthew Golden. Those were my five. I actually was a little bit higher on Antonio Williams. Antonio Williams has a foot injury. And there's a guy playing in his position, Tyler Brown for Clemson, who's performing really well. He's a true freshman, kind of under the radar guy, and he's really having a good season. And that's Antonio Williams' role. That guy, he produced fairly well his freshman year. This year it's an injury year, so take that for what it's worth. Matthew Golden plays at Houston. There's another guy there, Sam Brown, I think it is. He's just like putting up tons more market share than Matthew Golden this year, but I'm still pretty high on Matthew Golden. I still think he meets a lot of those metrics. I think this year, in year two, first of all, I'd mention for year two, looking at reception yards per team pass attempt, Luther Burden is literally off the chart in year two. This guy is performing way above, and Evan Stewart's had his share of injury issues, and he was even missed a game. But Luther Burden is off the charts. I'm talking like Jamar Chase level performance in year two. So this is the real deal. This guy is somebody that we're going to be looking at next year as wide receiver one among our groups of wide receivers. So keep that in mind. I'd say Tet McMillan is now a clear number 3 for me. Might even be edge above Evan Stewart for me as number 2. Sorry, I apologize for that, but just that just is the size weight type of thing argument there. But Tet is having a really good year this season this year. And our reception yards per team pass attempt, he's above there on the Evan Stewart. Now Evan Stewart did have the injury, so let's wait and finish this whole thing out. But I think Burden, McMillan, Stewart, and Brown are my top there. I'd probably lump Antonio Williams in there if he was producing this season, but there's always those question marks that come up. If you get injured and then you sort of have a down year, is it going to come back? And so there is a lot of uncertainty with them. But so far this right now, I'd have it Burden and then sort of like a tier for me. And then it'd be Stewart and McMillan. They're kind of in a tier. Maybe Brown in that tier as well. But Tet is the guy that's is pushing up strongly for me. And that's the guy that I put after Burden and Stewart.
Yeah, my man Christian's changing his Devy rankings right now as we speak. I just noticed it while he was going through his wide receivers. Do you want to know what
I'm
you changed?
updating,
What did
man.
you change? What did you update? What did you update there?
So I did a lot of updates. So what I actually did is I just took a peek at my top 24, and because I wanted to make the statement, oh, Luther Burden is a top 24 dynasty wide receiver for me right now, and realized that I had him at like 27. Um, but I want him to be top 24, and so I adjusted my rankings.
Okay.
I bumped him up ahead of Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley, and DJ Moore. So getting a little aggressive with the Devy wide receivers, but you sometimes got to do that.
Yeah, I will say, we do have our consensus rankings that we update. Well, that I'm updating currently. I'm gonna have it done tonight.
Same.
But like as we go through there, we do add like dynasty players, right? So like when I was looking at mine, as I've kind of gone through there, I will say this is something to note about the running back position. It's gross. And when I was doing the combined Devy dynasty, it's like, man, like I mean, I'm worried about Travion Henderson, but he's still my running back 7 in combined rankings because on the NFL side, I'm worried about a lot of NFL running backs. Excuse me. Like after Jonathan Taylor, Ken Walker, who I'm higher on than most, I'm like, man, where did we put Tony Pollard compared to that? Like, where do we put Singleton? Where are we putting some of these guys? Travis Etienne. So when we do those combined rankings, I think it helps us kind of justify some of these rankings and where we would trade. So you can find those on our Patreon. We do have them, and it's only $3 a month, so you can see them in there. And I think it's unique. Christian does more, he's got film and analytics, so he can kind of dive into that. Jay is, I don't want to say he's not a film grinder, but he's not a film grinder. He's more of an analytics guy. He's going to be looking at numbers and doing all that thing. And I pretty just do vibes. I'm a big vibe guy. And so like when you're looking at my rankings, you'll see that. But also I try to tie in value of like when I do rankings for Devy Dynasty combined like this, when we're trying to look at it, I'm like, hey, would I trade this guy? Like, so if, would I trade Crenshaw Judkins for DeAndre Swift straight up? They're right close to my rankings. They're 19 and 20 for me. Yeah, I'd probably do that for DeAndre Swift. And I maybe would trade Judkins maybe for DeAndre Swift, depending on the team and where it's at. So that's how we kind of look at those things. I will say, going back to the wide receiver argument, yeah, I think it's interesting. I think Barry and Brown could be like, I want to see Barry and Brown in a Mike McDaniel's offense. Like that's what I want to see. Because if he could do that, like, and this comes back to so we have a dynasty show that we do, me, Christian, and Jeff. He who should not be named. My bad. Jeff's not here right now. But and we talked about last episode because we were talking about Malik Neighbors, and we said Malik Neighbors could have like a really good upside. Like, and Jeff was kind of make the case that maybe Malik Neighbors could be a better fantasy asset than Marvin Harrison Jr. based on the way NFL's offenses are going or whatever. But when we were talking about this, like, really knowing where Barry and Brown goes, let's say Luther Burden goes to a team where he could be wide receiver 1. But maybe it's an offense that you're like, dang it, I don't see that offense really highlighting his strengths. But then Berrien goes to an offense like, let's just say Mike McDaniel's offense. Let's say Tyreek Hill leaves, they have Waddle, and then they get Berrien Brown. I would probably draft Berrien Brown a lot everywhere. Like I would just be like, okay, I'm going to trust him in that system. So I think that's something to notice too when we're talking about this and kind of going through it over the wide receiver talks as we go there. All right, anything else on the wide receivers?
Nope.
You guys are good there? All right. The only thing we got looking at, the games next week are not amazing. There's one big game. Texas, Oklahoma. The Red River Shootout is here. Both undefeated, and Oklahoma's not terrible. So when we're talking about like where Oklahoma's at right now, they're going to be probably, top 10, maybe they'll flip in there. Dylan Gabriel's looked really good. I know that people talked about that. Angelo Anthony, someone that we all like. He didn't have a great game today. But then you have Jonathan Brooks. He kind of came on in Texas. I put Jonathan Brooks on the big board today at the last pick. I said, hey, I think he's a redshirt sophomore, so I can include him. So he's in there as well. Real quick, I know we're going to get out of here in a second, but if you had to pick a winner in this game, I don't know what it is. Texas probably a 3-point favorite. I would assume 2.5 maybe point favorite there.
I don't know if the lines are out yet, but
I don't know if the lines are out either. But I would say around there. But just straight up, Texas, Oklahoma. Where are you going, Christian?
Texas. Also, there are lines out. They put them out 2 weeks ago. It'll probably shift, but Texas 5.5 point road favorites on the initial drop. So
well, they're both on the road. So
it's fair, but like, I don't know. Here's the thing. I think Texas is legit. They have these really slow starts every game though. And I get very concerned that if they have a slow start against a good Oklahoma team, they should be able to put up points. They're going to get too far behind to come back. However, I have faith in this offense. I have faith in their quarterback for the first time in a long time. Jonathan Brooks, we talked about that. But the wide receivers, the pass catching weapons, the only thing that I'm a little bit concerned about, JT Sanders left this game. I don't know if he came back in this game when I was watching. Didn't look good. He went back to the locker room. If they don't have JT Sanders out there, I think they have replaceable, guys that they can throw in there, but I don't know. I think if the line's big enough, I might hit Oklahoma to cover the spread. I do think Texas pulls out the win, though.
Where are you going, Jay? Texas, Oklahoma.
I'd go Texas. I think Oklahoma's team has been pretty surprising to me this season. I think they've played a lot better than my expectations, and from that perspective, I can understand them giving Texas quite the, especially because this is such a big game for them, and it's a good big game every year. But I've been really pleasantly surprised with what Oklahoma's been able to do this season. And I think they'll probably give Texas another tough match, but I got to go with Texas over Oklahoma.
Yeah, I think the thing with Texas, like Christian was talking about, I've watched Texas forever. Like I've been, as a college football fan, we've seen this. The last, 10, 15 years, Texas, like the game today against Kansas, it was close. Texas loses that game the last 10 or 15 years because they don't put them away. Texas has put teams away in that second half, fourth quarter. And I think that's the difference about Texas that we're seeing right now is Sark is he's dealing right now. He's one of the best play callers in college football. I think Quinn Ewers and those guys have it. Brooks being healthy and actually kind of coming out of there is good. I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be a fun game. But I cannot root for a team that let Art Briles come on the field this year. Like if you let Art Briles come on your field, that's too many bad vibes. I'm a bad vibe guy. I can't go with Art Briles on that side. Like I'm not going there. But we appreciate you guys tuning in. Before you get out of here, we appreciate you guys tuning in and watching. Give us a like, subscribe. Let us know what you guys think, in the comments. Who would you take? Who's your wide receiver 3 in that 2025 class? We'll be back next week. We're talking about the Red River Shootout. We talk about Oklahoma, Texas, and going from there. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Jay. And we'll see you guys next week.